Hello, my good friends. How are you doing today? I hope you all are doing good. So, who is joining us today? Who is joining us today? I know I started off this live stream quite late, but let's see how far we can go today. I can continue tomorrow. Hello, who are those joining us today? Hello. 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 All the 23 of you. Hello. I talk about life. I talk about law, aspects of laws that guide us. Yeah, how are you? Melda Queen. Melda Queen, how are you? Melda Queen, how are you doing? Good. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to change location. That's why. So sorry, please. Okay, so where are my good friends? Hello. Hello, my good friends. How are you doing? Melda Queen. We're talking about spousal support today. We're going to be discussing spousal support and how it can be beneficial to you. Melda Queen, are you still there? Hello, who are those joining us today? Hey, Lele Bears, how are you? Hello, Ricky, how you doing? It's good evening from here. Oh, nice. I hope your day went well. Amazing, amazing. I hope you had a good day. Yeah, nice. Are you married? Lele Bears, are you married? Hey, Eduardo, nice name. How are you? Oh, okay. Eduardo, how you doing? Shout out to my friends in Brazil. Vivi, hello. Okay, your name is Ola. My name is Nisi. I'm a Nigerian. And I'm going to be talking about spousal support today. Oh, Vivi, thanks a lot. I appreciate you. Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about spousal support today. And we're going to look at the how it works in Canada and then how it works in Nigeria. Probably for those in other countries like Brazil, I'm sure that it applies in your country just for a little variation, just little variations that may occur. I don't know, have any of you heard about spousal support, what they call spousal support? The support that a spouse gives the other, the financial support that a spouse pays to the other spouse in the event of divorce. Have you heard of it? Some people call it alimony. Some countries, some laws in some countries call it alimony. In Nigeria, we call it maintenance. Have any of you heard about any of these before? If you've heard, just let me know. Let me know if you've heard about any of these. Vivi, Lele Bies, Eduardo. Hello. Hello. Okay, like I just explained earlier what spousal support mean. Spousal support the is the financial support or the financial assistance that a spouse pays to the other spouse in the event of divorce. Now, like I said, in countries like the US, Canada, I think UK, they call it spousal support. In Nigeria, we call it maintenance. In some other countries, we call it um alimony. Okay, so it's more, in summary, it's just the financial support that a spouse pays to the other spouse in the event of divorce. Now, who actually pays and who receives? Now, before now, especially in Nigeria, it used to be the man that pays the woman spousal support. Okay, but by virtue of the latest provision of the Matrimonial Causes Act, I think Section 72, it made this, and it was called alimony that time. We made it, it is now called maintenance, and made it a spousal payment. That means it's no longer the duty of the man to pay the woman. It's the duty of the spouse that earns more. Okay, the spouse that earns more will pay the other spouse that does not earn more or does not have enough, and will suffer a financial disadvantage as a result of the divorce. So the spouse that is more advantageous, or that will be more advantageous at divorce, will now pay the other. And all these things will be supported by documentary evidence. If you are asking for maintenance, if you are applying for maintenance, and you are saying that your spouse is capable of paying, you should bring documentary evidence of maybe the person's pay slip, or the person's financial earnings. Hey, G-Man, wow, been a while. Good evening. Longest time, G-Man. Where did he disappear to? Nice. It's so good to see you. How have you been, G-Man? So now, for Nigeria, spousal support is used to be paid in the event of a divorce application. When a spouse applies to court for divorce, he adds that application, that he adds his relief of maintenance as one of the reliefs sought in his application for divorce. Okay, but in Canada, spousal support is either paid by, oh, I'm so sorry, G-Man. I'm so sorry. Sorry, oh. Sorry about your health. So sorry. I'm glad you said you feel a lot better now. Please don't fall sick, oh. Yeah, so now in Canada, I mean in Nigeria, like I said, spousal support is it's more like is paid either between legally married people or people of common law marriage. Okay, it's usually paid either between legally married people or people of common law marriage. So, like I said, traditionally the wife receives the husband's pay, but presently now in Nigeria, any of the party can receive and any of the parties can pay. Oh, I'm so sorry. Please, I just hope you finish it as soon as possible. So, and then in Nigeria, the spousal support is governed by the Matrimonial Causes Act. That's for statutory marriages, the one we call court marriage, you know. But in Canada, spousal support is governed by the Divorce Act. Spousal support is governed by the Divorce Act, okay? And you know that in Nigeria it's not only statutory marriage we have the customary marriage and the Islamic marriage, which is governed, which governs which laws that govern spousal support under this kind of marriages is dependent on the type of marriage and the type of tradition that operates. Okay, so we will not go so much into the laws. Now, like I said, because the wife in Nigeria generally is the dependent and usually is the one that acts, does not make it the right of the wife to always receive. Is the right of both spouse to always receive. It just depends on the financial capability of the spouse. So now for spousal support application, both in Canada and in Nigeria, there are certain things that the law or the court will look at to grant the application for spousal support. What I mean is, when you approach the court to say, I want my husband to be paying me this amount of money every month, after divorce, so that I can take care of myself. See, because I was married, because I had children, I was not able to work. Now he's divorcing me. I will need so and so amount of money. Or the husband will say, I want my wife to be paying me so and so amount of money for maybe 10 years or 15 years, and this is how much. The court will look at a lot of things before the court grants that application. And one of them, which is the basic one, is your financial need. How much do you need this money? Now, if you're someone that is well placed by virtue of your position in the society or where you work, your salary, and the court looks at it and sees that with the kind of position you are in this your organization or where you work, and with the amount you earn, you are able to take care of yourself, the court will not grant that application. Okay, the court will not grant that application. Now, if the court looks at your application and sees that this amount, I'm asking the court to that my husband should be paying me 1 million every year. Okay, I'm asking the court that my husband should be paying me 1 million every year. Okay, so the court will now look at what proof do you have that your husband can afford 1 million, or your wife can afford 1 million, sorry, every month. What proof? You have to bring his pay slip, you have to bring an evidence. So the court will look at the financial capability of the spouse that is to pay. The court will look at the financial capability of the spouse that is to pay. Now, the court will look at the conduct of the parties. How do you behave? Are you an extravagant person? Are you a careless person? The court will look at all these things before granting such application. They call it conduct of the parties. The court will look at the conduct. Are you lying to the court? Another thing the court will look at is the length of the marriage. How much of time you have sown into that marriage? How much time have you invested in that marriage? The court will look at it. Because if you have stayed, if it's a marriage that has lasted for a long time, of course you would have both in age and in terms of putting yourself in the marriage. The court will see how much you have invested, and of course you will need some level of compensation, financial compensation. So the court will consider the length of the marriage in this regard. Okay? Now, these are the things that the court will look at. And then, usually, the duration of this spousal support is not fixed. Is usually not fixed. In Nigeria, under our Matrimonial Causes or Act, the spousal support ends when the spouse remarries. When the spouse that is receiving support remarries, automatically the spousal support ends. The obligation of the spouse that is paying to continue paying automatically abates. Okay, it ends by virtue of the remarriage of the other spouse. That's the spouse that is receiving. So the duration could be long term, the duration could be short term, depending on the circumstances of the case. Now, in Nigeria, spousal support is rarely, from experience anyway, I have, if I have applied for divorce petition, I would say that in every 10 divorce petition, probably 3 or 4 would be asking for spousal support. So, and it's usually the women that ask, and usually they ask for the support because they are asking for custody of the children. So they are asking for maintenance of the children. They are not really asking for themselves. So it's a bit rare in Nigeria. But in Canada, spousal support is more prevalent, and it applies either between, spousal support in Canada applies, like I said, either between legal marriage under the Divorce Act that governs marriages, or under common law marriages, what we call contract marriage, So, and like I said, in Canada as well, spousal support is governed by the Divorce Act, and it is gender neutral. It's not specific for either the man to be paying or the woman to be paying. It's dependent on the spouse that has the financial capability to pay. So in Canada, it is much more structured and it is common. It's prevalent. Now, what the court considers for granting spousal support in Canada is the length of the relationship. Remember, we're not just looking at only legal marriages. We are also looking at common law marriages. So the court will look at, like in Nigerian case, the court will look at the length. How long have you people been in this relationship? The court will look at the income difference between both parties. If you say that this person should be paying you, what is the difference in terms of your earnings? How much? How wide is it? If it's not so wide, the court may be reluctant to grant that application. But if it is wide, of course, the court will grant the application to a reasonable extent. Okay. So now the court will also look at the roles. The court will look at the role of each of the spouse. The court will look at the role of each of the spouse. And then the court will also look at the conduct of the parties. The court will look at the conduct of the parties before the granting of this spousal support. Okay? So now, what question comes to mind? What question comes to mind? The question that comes to mind most times is, what a lot of people keep asking that a lot of people keep asking how much can one ask for? What is reasonable in the eyes of the court? What is reasonable in the eyes of the court for one to ask when bringing an application for spousal support, so that you don't go too high and you don't go too low? Now, that question cannot be answered. That question cannot be answered. Will I say a single answer cannot be given to that question, because it depends on the peculiarity of the case, and it depends on the earnings. Okay, how much, if you are asking for an amount of money for spousal support, number one, you have to be sincere enough about your own earning. I'm talking about both Canada and Nigeria now. In bringing an application for spousal support, you have to be sincere enough about your own earnings, and in your demand, you have to also be sincere enough, and you have to attach the requisite evidence or documents to show that this my spouse I'm asking this thing for is financially capable. And then you must prove that you have spent enough time in that relationship or in that marriage for you to be entitled. Because the amount of time you have spent will actually it will actually determine how much of yourself you gave into the relationship, and then how much you will earn from it, or how much you will get from the court. The court looks at a lot of things for you to be entitled to your application. So it's not a single answer. It's not a one size fits all answer that is given in spousal support. It's an answer that is tailored to the peculiarity of the case, the peculiarity of the marriage, and the circumstances of the situation at hand. Yes, so that's how the court looks at it. Okay. Now, for Canada, the court also looks at the age, the health, and the ability of the spouse that is asking to work. So the court looks at your age. If you are still young and able to work, the likelihood that the court will grant your spousal support application is very slim. But if you are now advanced and unable to work, of course, if it also applies to ability and your health. If you are healthy, if you are in good health condition to work, the court will be reluctant, okay, in granting it. So if it's short-term marriages, the court will grant temporary support. That's for Canada now. If it's short-term marriages, the court will grant temporary support. If it's long-term marriages, the court will grant long-term or indefinite support. That's for Canada now, which is different from Nigeria. So like I said earlier, spousal support in Canada is more structured, and it is very well enforced and taken seriously. In Canada, it is very well enforced and taken seriously. So now, if we are looking at the difference in terms of applicability of spousal support in both jurisdictions, you will see that in Nigeria, spousal support is not as structured. Yes, it's in our laws, but it is not as structured, and it is rare. But in Canada, it is very common. Now, in Nigeria, usually it is the women, even though our law says that it is now gender neutral. Our law says, but in practice, it is usually the women that ask. But in Canada, it is gender neutral, both in law and in practice. Now, the duration in Nigeria, like I said, is dependent on when the spouse that is receiving remarries. If the spouse takes long, it is long term. If it doesn't take long to marry, it's short term. But in Canada, it depends on the length of the marriage. The duration of the spousal support depends on the length of the marriage. If it's a short, or the length of the relationship. If it's a short relationship, it's a short spousal support. If it's a long-term relationship, then it is a long-term or indefinite spousal support. Okay. So, and for Nigeria, what the court looks at differ. The court looks at the earning capabilities, the court looks at the conduct of the parties. But in Canada, the court looks at the age, the health, the length of the marriage, and so many other things. Okay, which is quite different in Canada, in Nigeria. So that is, and then in Canada, the law that governs it is the Divorce Act, while in Nigeria, the law that governs spousal support is the Matrimonial Causes Act. Okay, so I've done a thorough analysis of both jurisdictions with respect to the laws and the applicability of spousal support. However, if you have any question, any specific question, you can ask, and I will try to answer your question. We have about 29 minutes to go to end this live stream. So if you have any question with respect to what I have just said about spousal support, or you are actually in the middle of it, you are experiencing a challenge, you can now ask your questions, and let me know what those questions are. Do you have any question whatsoever? I'm here for it. I'm here for your question. Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Do you have any questions, my good friends? Any questions? G-Man, are you still there? Or did you run away? Hello, hello. Hello. Hello, Amarachi. How are you doing? Any question? You have any question? Guys, what's happening now? G-Man. Where is everybody? Why is everybody? Okay, if I don't get any response, I may have to end this live stream.